Good morning, gentlemen. Nice to see Mayor's New Year's resolution. We're chilling all day. All right. Shkach to Levi for partaking. Good morning, Yigal. I see you there. Nice to see you. I got my shirt on. All right. So Shkach to Levi, thank you for taking over. So today is Daf Samach Aleph. Mesechus Baba Kama. So Mishnah smack in the middle, Naya Mishnah, and away we go. Over Geder Shu Gavoa Dalat Amos, Derech Harabim, or Nahar Potter. So we're talking about where there's different types of damage mentioned in the Torah. There's pit, there's your goring animal, right? And another one, which is mentioned, is fire. So if a fire, one sets a fire, he's responsible for his fire. So let's say that he has a fire in his yard, and he has a fence, and the fence is Dalad Amos, or there's, let's say, a public path or a road, and then there's someone's field on the other side of Derech Harabim, or a river, and the other side of the river is his friend's yard, and this fire goes ahead and catches, which is not normally the derech for it to go beyond that. Then he's Potter, because that is not normal, right? In other words, if he didn't have any borders in between and he sets a fire in his yard and it catches to his neighbor, so then he's going to be responsible. But if he has a fire in his yard and there is a proper protection, quote unquote, or separation from one's neighbor, then he is Potter. So Zak the Gemara, I Dalad Amos. What time we're going to price over a Geder Shu Gavo Arba Amos Chayit? We have a price that says if it's the fence is 4 Amos, then he's chayit. Someone else, Papa, no. Our mission is really talking about from top to bottom, but more importantly, is the ad, right? V'ad b'chlal, which doesn't mention in the Gemara, but that's which is the understanding. In other words, sheish amos. Let's see if he's a 6 amos wall, he's Potter. Chamesh amos Potter. Ad arba amos Potter. So up until 4, including 4 amos, as long as it's 4 amos, then he's Potter. And that's what our mission is talking about. And Tana Barah, but the other one, which we just brought up, that says Shel Gavor Arba Amos is Dalid, is Chayiv. So that was that's going milamata lamala from down up. In other words, Kachashiv Shtei Amos. If you only have a wall, it's 2 Amos Chayiv. Shalosh Amos if you go off 3 Amos Chayiv. And also Ad Arba Amos up until 4 Amos. In other words, the law Ad Bechal, not including 4 Amos, 3.99. That's what the price meant that you're Chayiv. And Amar Rava says, Rava Dal Amar Shamru the Potter Afilu B'Sida Kaitz. Even we're talking about, let's say the field next to it is, let's say, thorns, which are very flammable. So even though that can go over a field of thorns, nevertheless, since it was the proper distance, and we'll talk about this, then he would still be Potter. And Amar Papa says, Rav Papa. It has to be, but that which we say, there has to be a 4 amos separation. So let's say if there's if there's Dalad Amos, but that the thorns are just as high, that doesn't work. In other words, because then it will connect it. In other words, the Dalad Amos has to be above that which is that which would be flammable, something of kotzim, of thorns. And Amar Rab says, Rab was machlokas lo shanu ela bekolachas. We're only talking about a fire that goes up, which is more of a natural fire, ba b'nechafefes, right? Which is lashon of bending over. Something perhaps that either goes sideways or down. Afilu admei ama. Those are naturally can go sideways. I don't know if it's the brush fires or whatever it is, but those naturally go sideways, and therefore, even if you have a wider distance in between, right, then that would still catch. A normal fire, I guess, perhaps it has to do with maybe the winds, right? But a normal fire just burns up, and if something is near it, then it'll catch to it. But if it's already something that goes downwards or sideways, right, bends, then he would be chayvin with greater distance. Ushmul Amar Mas Nisan. No, our mission is talking about benachafefes, right? Even if it's a bending one that goes sideways, that's up to Dalad Amos. If let's say you have a roadway or something more in between yours and your neighbor's yard, then you're okay. But if it's just supposed to go straight up, then even any amount, then you're Potter. That was according to Shmuel in this case. So Rav is the more machmer in this case. Amen. Wow. Let's say the Rav We have a price in support of Rab B'medvar Murim. With what are we talking about? B'kolachas, right? So this price of favor is like Rab. This machlokes we're talking about, it was a fire. They go straight up. But if it's one that bent fire, but eight and there's brushwood or something that can that catch fire easily. Afilu ad mea mil chayv. Even if it's 100 mil, then you are chayv. And avra nar shalulis, and if it crosses over a river or shalulis, which we'll soon see later in the Gemara, shehem rachvim ches amos, which is at least minimum distance of 8 amos, then one is puppet. Fine. So that was the end of that price. I'm sorry? No, we had Dalet Amos of defense. Our Mishnah said, oh, Nahar. We're actually going to go into very soon in terms of what is this waterway in between? Is there water in there, or is it just the area? So let's see. Look, the next part of the Mishnah where it says, Derech HaRab. So Derech HaRab, Saman Tana. Who is this opinion? I'm a Rabbi Ezri, the Tanai with the Mishnah, Rabbi Ezri, Sheish Esrei Amos Kederech Shesarabim. Right? The public way is 16 Amos. And that's what we're referring to. It's the 16 amos in between. Oh, nar, or a river. So Rav Omar Nar Mamish. It has to be a Mamish river. Shmuel Omar Arisa de Deloy, right? Like a watering pit. Right? Rashi said Arisa de Deloy, right? It says Yor Katan Shedoilin Mimenu Mashkin Sados, right? It could be much smaller, right? Not a full-size river, but something that they use for irrigation, which has constant water that they draw water from, as long as that it could be even, one amma deep, but it's that which they use it for watering. There's constantly water there. Then that is enough of a separation. So Mandam or Nar Mamish, the one who says there has to be a river on your side in order to protect you from liability. Even if there's no water. Well, Mandam Arisa Delay, but if it's only talking about like it's an irrigation canal, the East Bay Maya only if it has water, then it's considered to be a proper protection from liability. Aval Leslie Bay Maya, but if there's no water, then that would not work. Just like I guess a dish that they dig up and then it fills, I guess, with water, underground water, so constantly has water there, and they use that to water their fields. So it's like it's not necessarily a river; it's more of a man-made river. So Tanad Hasam, we learn over there the Elu Mafsikin Lepeya. So now let's take a look at a similar situation. Right, we're talking about liability now. So there's another halacha that one has to go ahead and give to the poor the corners of his field. That's one of the one is a commandment. And so you have to get the corner. So what technically is a field? Let's say I have a huge field and there's like a road in an alley that goes between, like a service road, right? Is that considered to be 2 fields, one on each side, or is it just one large field? Right? The difference would be whether I have to give a corner from each one, or it could just is sufficient to just it's 1 field, 1 corner. So Elu Mafsik Lepeya. So these are considered to be separations, which now qualify, make it into 2 separate fields. Hanachal, by some sort of brook, Bashvulis, and shlulis, right, which we just said we're going to go ahead and define in a minute, right? 1 second. Shlulis, but they're chayachid, or a private way, but they're charabim, or a public way. So my shlulis, what shlulis? Makam shemei geshamim shelin sham. Right, it's like an area that rainwater gathers. So shlulis, that is considered to be a separation for. In terms of payah, it's considered to be a separation for 2 different fields. Flood control. Shol and Sham and Rav Bibi Amar Rabbi Yechon Amos Hamayim Shemachalekes Shalol Alakba. So we say talking about some sort of Amos Hamayim, a channel of water that goes through that. That usually the water goes there, up to its up to the ends. So Man the Amar Malcolm Shemeka Sham Shalin Sham, the one who says that it's like a ditch where it's used when it rains, only then does it fill up. So kol shekain amos hamayim, if that is considered to be something that's just dug for rainwater, extra rainwater, like a reservoir for it to go, certainly an amos hamayim, which has constant water, certainly that would be considered to be a separation of 2 fields. Well, it has to be something when this canal or whatever, this area that's used for water, this channel of Malcolm Shemei Gesham, if it's just an area of an overflow of rainwater, Shemei Gesham Shalin Sham Lei Mafsiki, that is not considered big. In other words, so the Amos Hamayim is more of a separation than just a ditch dug for rainwater. So if you say a ditch dug for rainwater is a separation, certainly this water channel is. If you just say it has to be a water channel, then the ditch that's dug for the extra water, for the rainwater, for it together, that is not considered to be a separation. And why is that? Because those are bagni the aramik. They're only considered to be like bowls, right, where it holds water of the land. And it's still considered to be ground, and therefore ground is not a separation of ground, and therefore it's all considered to be one field when it comes to paying. Fine. Mishnah. Next Mishnah says, top of the page on Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Hamalik b'seich shalom. One who lights in my own field. So let's say I don't have necessarily a fence around but I have a large yard. So Malik b'seich shalom ad kamatov hadleika. How far does the fire have to go in order for it to be my responsibility? So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer roidosa kiluhu be'amtza beis kur. Has to be in a base kur. Base kur is an area. Right, you have to grow a certain amount, a amount of wheat, and I looked over here that it says it's basically a square of 274 amos by, let's say, 274 amos. So that would be the large square. So you go in the center, half of 274 is 137. So basically 137 amos to the nearest, to the next border. So if I'm 137 amos and I had no fence, but it was just my field, and my field was directly next to a parcel next to my friend, but mine was 137 away, I should be putter from liability. Well, unless, right, we saw earlier that if it was, right, it has machlokas, whether it was something, a fire that goes up or one that goes down. And also we had a case of kotzin, of thorns, and we said even mea mili, even 100 miles, if it's all kotzin, something flammable, like, let's say there's all brush or whatever it is, that it would naturally go, then there would be liability.
The assumption there isn't.
Right, exactly. Right. It could be maybe the wind took it, or right, exactly.
Sideways fire.
No, all you need is, let's say, an area of 16 amos, right? Right? A road of 16 amos is good enough. So this is good enough. Rabbi Kiva Omer, 50 amos to the border, that's sufficient. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shalem, Yishalem. The pasuk says the person who set the fire has to pay. Or Hamavis Eish, the one who sets the fire. Hakol Lafia Deleka. So it depends on the fire. We'll soon see what that means. Zakdamar, what is Rabbi Shimon talking about? Less like Rabbi Shimon Shira, the Deleka. What Rabbi Shimon says, there's no minimum Shira of Deleka. You just see what the fire is, right? Tonight we learn in the Mishnah, Lo Yamad Adam Tonor B'Seich Habayis Elim Ken Yeshua Al Gabo Kova Dalad Abbas, right? If, let's say, you live in a building, an apartment building, a two-flat, and you want to use an oven. Oven has a stronger fire, so you have to make sure above the oven you have 4 amos of airspace. Because if I don't have 4 amos of airspace, I don't have 2 amos of airspace, and a fire catches, I'm liable. But if there was 6 amos and it was my fire, and even though there was 6 amos, for whatever reason the fire caught on, then I really would be putter from liability. So it says over there. So if you have dalat amos, go dalat amos. And so elim ken yesh al gabo govi dalamos haya mamido balia. If one goes ahead and lives on top, so also there's heat from it that goes below. So ad she'etachtav ma'aziva, unless you have like in the cement or the plaster, shleisha tefachim. You only need 3 tefachim down, as long as there's 3 tefachim of plaster between my oven and my downstairs. Right then. I'm not responsible for the fire. But kira and a kira, which is more of a smaller stovetop, tefach, you only need a tefach. And if any of these, and he has sufficient distance, but nevertheless causes damage, if he doesn't have this, excuse me, then he has to pay for his damages. And no, what Rabbi Shimon is saying, no, that these are the measurements, meaning if you take the proper precautions and you have these measurements, then you are putter. You put them in. So what do we see over here? Rabbi Shimon does hold there are minimum standards of fire protection, what one has to do in order to protect his fire to ensure that he's not liable. It depends to the nature and the height of the fire, right? What kind of fire, is the person lighting? Is it a small little fire that, or is it a bonfire? So therefore, it depends on the deleka. It's not an exact science. That it depends on the nature of the fire. Fine. Zok the Mishnah. So the Mishnah, actually, we've seen part of this Mishnah several times. Hamadlik as a gadish v'hayuba kalim. one who goes ahead and lights a fire. I cause a fire in my friend's his pile of wheat. So really, I have to pay for his wheat, right? I started the fire, but he was hiding, utensils inside the dalku, and they got destroyed. I think it's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, I'm responsible to pay. I set the fire to his wheat, so even though he was hiding inside there his baseball mitt, I have to pay for wheat and his baseball glove. No, he pays whatever it was, wherever the Gadish is. He put something in there. That's not my responsibility, as we've seen with Pasuk and Torah, as we'll get into. The Torah says, right, you go ahead and you pay for that, but something which is tumah, something which is hidden from the eye, that I'm not responsible for it, despite the fact that I caused the fire. Now, this is the part we saw earlier. If you have a case of, now, you got a stack of wheat. You got attached to the wheat is someone's animal, right? So if I kill someone's animal, I'm responsible for payment, right? There's no death penalty to kill an animal, right? It's not pita, right? So if there's a pile of wheat and there's some sort of goat, right? That's tied to it, it's leashed to it, that can't get away. The eved samachlo, and there's an eved, a person, someone's servant who's also is considered to be of one's property and is close to it, but he has legs and can run away. There's a fire, right? He's a big boy. For these safimo, and all three get destroyed. The wheat, the goat that was tied, and the untied servant, and the guy dies. Then chayiv. Then the guy who set the fire is chayiv. Why? Because the wheat I set fire to. The goat was tied to it. And I'm putter from any sort of liability on the servant because the guy should just ran away. However, if it was evikapasla, the gadi samachlo, let's say the slave was tied to the fire, right, to the area that I set on fire, and the goat was close to it, v'nisraf and burns imo, putter. Then I am putter. I'm putter in that case from paying. Why is that? Because I'm chayiv benafsha, right? Because really I killed a person, right? I set a fire to something that the person was tied to. So therefore we have a concept of kim leib the rabbi, right? That if I have chayiv for two different punishments, I get the more severe. So therefore, since I'm chayiv for murdering this person, so therefore I am putter from payment. However, the Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Yehuda, but Malik es abira. The one who goes ahead and he lights a larger fire, because the bira is a large building or something which has a lot of things inside. I couldn't see it. It was tumbling, it was hidden. No, because it's normal for a large structure to have lots of items inside. So if I set on fire a large structure, then I pay. The Chachamim agree that you pay for that which you can't see is hidden from the eye. Because people go ahead and they put things in their house, they put things in their larger structures. So therefore, it should have been known that the baseball glove or whatever it was in this larger structure in his house, and therefore I'm responsible to go ahead and pay for everything that was inside this bira or this house. Zok the Gemara. So Amrav Kahana, middle of the page, Machlekes b'malik b'seich shelo, v'holcha v'achla b'seich shel chavera. The Machlekes over here we're talking about is when I set the fire in my own yard, and then it goes and destroys. Right, my friend's yard, and it destroys his haystack or his wheat stack, whatever it was, in his yard, and there was something in that wheat stack in his yard. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev, because Rabbi Yehuda says aniske tamun beish, because Rabbi Yehuda says I'm mechayev for things that are hidden within the fire. Rabbanan the patri and the Rabbanan say pater. But if I go into someone's yard and I light right onto the wheat that was in his yard, right, and then he had his baseball glove inside his wheat stack. I was just going ahead. Okay, I'll burn this fire, and he says, "You owe me $100." Okay, I don't care. And it turns out he was hiding his baseball mitt in there, which is $200. Now I got to pay him $300 because I know Dibri called Mishalim. Even the Rabbanan agree that you pay for Tamun. Why? Because I set the fire in his yard. The only time where the Torah says that you're pater from things that are hidden is when I set the fire in my yard and I'm not responsible with my fire. In other words, it catches on to my neighbor. I didn't have a fence or whatever it was, and it caught on, and it burnt his wheat stack, and then his mitt was destroyed. I also got to pay for the mitt in that case. And Amalei Rava says, if that's the case, at the Tani Sefer, why did our mission have to go to a completely different case of the case of the Sefer where Modim Chachamim Rabbi Yehuda, where the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yehuda, the Malik is a bira when one goes ahead and let's say sets fire to a larger structure, right? Because over there I have to pay for everything in the structure because it's normal for people to leave things in the house. Why did it give me that case? You can go ahead and say in this exact case when you're just setting fire to a haystack. Right? When is the machlokas b'dinis coming Rabbi Yehuda? Only when I light the fire in my own yard. Then it goes ahead and it consumes his haystack in his yard. About malik b'seich shel chaver, but if I go ahead and I light the haystack in his yard, I should be responsible to pay not only for if I light the fire in his yard, I should be responsible for his haystack and his baseball mitt that was hidden inside.
It's not normal for baseball mitt to be hidden in a haystack. A building that makes sense.
100%. But that's what we're saying. We're saying is since I didn't have permission to even start the fire, in other words, I have permission to start a fire in my own property. So therefore, that's okay. But once I light a fire in someone else's property, I had no permission to do that. Therefore, my responsibility is even more that I have to pay something which is not normally in there. All right, and now Chachamim would agree to that. So if that's the case, why don't we say that in our Mishnah? If everyone agrees to that, or maybe like not Rava, you say, you know what? The halach is if I light something to the haystack, even though I have no permission to light to the haystack, I'm only chai for the haystack. I shouldn't be chai for something that happened to be inside because that's abnormal, right? So Elo my Rava betarti pligi. So it must be that it's not true. There's two machlokes in pligi. They argue malik b'seich shel avera. They argue in a case when I go ahead and I light the fire in my own property, and then that fire travels and goes ahead and consumes into my friend's yard. Rabbi Yehuda is chayiv b'tamah b'eish. He says I'm chayiv for even hidden things in that case. Rabban will stick to the gun, saying loy mechayiv. No, you're not chayiv. You're not chayiv for something which is hidden in the fire. Upligi namen. They also argue b'malik b'shel chavero. And Rabban said they'll see even my argue in a case of when I light the fire in my friend's yard. Rabbi Yehuda says. You have to go ahead and pay for anything that's in there. Gafilu arniki, and even if let's say you hit a person there, you hit this person there, you don't want someone to find it, he put it in there. Even in the case of the arniki, Rabbanan Sabri, Kalim Shadark Lahatmi. If those utensils normally put in there, let's say your farming instruments. So that's normal. To go Merigan, the bakar, by something which uses for the cattle, or other things which is used for threshing or farming. That I would have to go ahead and pay for a Kohen Rabbanan. However, Kalim, because those are normal, even though they were hidden. Right, that's the extra liability. Is if it was in my yard and even if it was normally hidden, so then I would be pater for. How about this case? But something that's not normally an yard, keep a gadish lemishon. I would not go ahead and have to pay for it. 4 lines from the bottom. Tanra button. Hamali gesagadish v'hayu b'kalim. One goes ahead and lights a fire, right? A haystack. V'hayu b'kalim, and then there were utensils in there. V'dalko, and they burnt. Rabbi Yehuda oimer mishalim kol ma shahaya b'seichel. Rabbi Yehuda says you got to go ahead and pay for it. No, I only have to go ahead. Let's say it was wheat. I pay for wheat, a little more expensive. Or gadish sasarin, or let's say it was barley, a little less expensive. I have to pay for the barley. And then we look as if that the area that where the fire was, that I pay for that. In other words, let's say hay, right? So let's say if half the hay was just used as a cover for some sort of box contents. So I'm pater from paying for the contents of the box because it's Talmud Chachamim. But we look as the entire space as if it would have been wheat. So there is some sort of liability for the area. So if it was 1 cubic foot, I would have to pay for a cubic foot of wheat in addition to the actual wheat that was burnt. Even though if I would have had to pay for the contents of the box, it would have been much more. I still have some sort of liability. I'm not completely pater. We just look as if nothing was hidden in it. We look as the entire pile was what was appearing on the outside. And the medvar and what are we talking about? B'malik b'sach shalom. Right, the halach of a dalka b'sach shakaveru. When I go ahead and set the fire in my own property, it goes ahead and it goes to my neighbor's property. But if I go ahead and set in his yard, right, then he would have to go ahead and pay for everything that was there. According to this price, let's say I say, hey, Avrami, you want to go ahead and use my space? You can go ahead. I'll lend you the space to put your haystack there. He says, yo, you're such a nice guy. He puts it in my yard. So he says, you can go ahead. To put it there. And then Avrami goes ahead and he puts his wheat there and he hides something in it. So Avrami leaves. I say, you know what? I'm going to set fire to his wheat. And I'm just going to give him $100 because that's what it was worth. And it turns out he put his, he was hiding all his cash from his HVAC business in there. Then I am putter from paying that, even though I gave him the space, even though it was in my yard, right? So Rabbi Yehuda would even agree in this case that Avrami was given rights to go ahead and put his wheat there, but he wasn't given right to go ahead and use the wheat as, to hide things. And therefore there is no liability with the owner. Only the Gadish Bilbad. And let's say it was a case of Lahagdish Chitin, Vihigdish Sar, and let's say I said, Avram, you can go ahead and put your wheat there, a little more expensive. Let's say wheat is $100 and probably would only be $80. So I said, you can put a barley of wheat. So he said he goes ahead and he puts barley. He only puts $80 value. Or Sa'arin, or he puts, I said, okay, you can go ahead and put barley there. Vihigdish Chitin, he puts in wheat there. So let me just explain the liability in this case. So both these cases, I only pay $80. Well, actually, I'll just go one at a time. The end is I only have to pay for barley each time. So the first case, when I said go ahead and put wheat there, and he put barley there, and I set fire to it. So I set fire to barley. I'm responsible for barley, right? Let's say I tell him you can put your barley in there, right? This is case number 2, and he puts his wheat there, and I set it on fire. So I didn't take upon myself liability for him to go ahead and put wheat. It's very expensive. Maybe I wouldn't have allowed him to do it. I only would have told him, I only told him barley. So therefore I only have to pay up to $80, even though I saw it was wheat. Or next case, if it was chitin, the chipan b'sayir, and let's say it was wheat on top and he covered it with barley, so it appeared all as barley, and I set it on fire. So therefore I'm responsible for barley because it looked like barley. And siren, and if he went ahead and put barley b'chitin, and he only went ahead and he put wheat on top, since I only gave him permission for barley, even though it appeared like wheat, I only gave him permission for barley. Nevertheless, shein m'shalim ela demei sa'arim bilvad. All these cases, I only have to go ahead and pay them the value of the barley itself. All right, we'll stop here. Shkoyach, everybody. It's nice to be back. Nice to see everyone's face. And it's a chef. We'll see you all tomorrow. And looking forward to seeing everyone, including you, Gal, in person. Have a wonderful day.
Israel.